Hey, Kashimo, you better be cooking, dog, because the last guy who I thought was gonna cook ended up being the meal. Thank you to our $5 patrons, Red Wolf 4765, Midnight Gem Lord, and Sean. Thank you to our $3 members, Recliner Plays and Red Wolf 4765, and a very big thank you to our $25 patron, Alex Ice Rose. Before we hop into this discussion on how powerful Kashimo has to be and how much he has to evolve in order to stand up to the usurper king of curses, please remember to leave your own list on how strong Kashimo is in the comments section down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also hit that little notification so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also I do a Patreon below, each video as one, get them on down. Let's do some videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Now, let's hop into the discussion. What's up guys, all Pencil here, and let's talk about Kashimo Hajime, the lightning beast of Jujutsu Kaisen, and how, he's walking on a path towards destruction, if you ask me, for his main dream is to essentially destroy himself. But let's talk about why. So, Kashimo Hajime, the moment he was introduced, had one real goal in mind, and that was to fight Sukuna, our king of curses himself, Sukuna. And notably, at the time he was introduced, chapter 158, his goal was established. He was sick and tired of all the fodder he was running into, and he wanted to fight some real beast, some real monster, to get him a real fight, which he figured out was Sukuna. And we find out later that he heard that from Kenjaku around 400 years back, so he really wanted to smoke with Sukuna. And I will admit, at the time he was introduced, I could have believed the hype. Alright, I'll be real with you. When I first heard it, I was like, because this is, of course, right after Shibuya. We did see Sukuna absolutely dog on a disaster curse who could drop literal meteors, the ultimate summoning of the 10 shadows technique that may or may not have executed a 6 eyes plus a limitless user in the past, and on top of that, really was just styling and profiling all over Shibuya and all over the body. So Sukuna, he seemed like in an entirely different league, but notably we didn't know anything about Kashimo, his scaling, or anything like that up to this point. We just know that he wanted to fight Sukuna, and admittedly that interested me. Like, notably, at the time he was introduced, no one had actually, expressed interest in throwing hands with Sukuna directly. They wanted his help, they wanted his support, they thought he was a real cool cat and wanted to bring him back, but, no one really wanted to throw hands with him. So already, Kashimo started off with a really interesting introduction, straight up asking, where's Sukuna? You want hands? You have 200 points in the culling games, and from our point of view, the culling games started, last week. What the heck? What you been doing, bro? You just been stat padded on sorcerers? What you doing, bro? So obviously, Kashimo introduced himself really, really well. And the thing was, he only got better and better after we actually got to see him throw hands with someone of relevance, which was Hakari Kenji. And this fight is very, very important for Kashimo's scaling for more reasons than one. One, it's the only actual fight we have of Kashimo that is with someone who isn't an entire unknown. Legitimately, who else has Kashimo fought other than Hakari? He one-shot a dude in his introduction, off-screen, and he one-shot maybe 20 other people. That's a lie. 40 other sorcerers. Well, no. The one guy off screen, and then 39 other sorcerers, because he had 200 points. That's about it. That's all we saw from Brody. That's about all he had to offer, and none of that's really scaling. And sure, he was really strong 400 years ago. He cleared out a whole group of people, as we saw even in his old age, beyond his prime. But even still, that's no real scaling. So the only scaling we have for Kashimo is off the Hakari fight. And notably, this is still very, very impressive for him. Notably, Hakari is stated to be stronger than Yuta by Yuta himself. Now, I'm sorry, I know, Yuta fans, before you reach through your screens and then reach through my microphone and grab me by the throat, I'm sorry. I'm just going to take it at face value. Yuta has no reason to lie in that moment. And it makes sense based on how we know cursed energy reinforcement works and all that good stuff. Base Hakari, in terms of just raw gains, is stronger than Yuta. Thus, when they both have infinite cursed energy, it makes sense that Hakari would be stronger. Alright? We just gonna rock with that. So, Kashimo being able to survive Hakari with infinite cursed energy, slobber knocking him in the mouth, kicking him, body bagging him like that, and being able to just get back up is really, really good. Insanely good for Kashimo in the scaling, because that puts them in the special grade tier. Solidly in the special grade tier. Heck, arguably, at least in terms of attack potency, Kashimo should be well above the special grade tier, because when he uses that lightning, he's able to casually tear through a jackpot Hikari, which is extremely impressive considering what Hikari's durability should be at. So that is pretty darn crazy. Really, really good for his scaling. Once again, well into the special grade tier. And this makes sense based on all his historical hype, the fact that he had 200 points. And like Higuruma, who low-key was kind of a fraud. Like, no... We'll talk about Higuruma in his own video, but he was low-key kind of a fraud. Kashimo proved himself to be pretty about that life. But the issue is, Kashimo doesn't have the highest output in all of history. He just doesn't. We know that for a fact. You know what happened to the guy who did have the highest output in history? In the Culling games? When he ran into Sukuna, he got one-tapped. Singular tapped. It wasn't even a discussion. There wasn't even a fight. Like, I bet you can look up Sukuna versus Ryu and you literally wouldn't even find it on the wiki. Because it's not really a fight, it was an embarrassment. And not going to lie, I can definitely understand the group of people who would believe, you know, due to Yuta's statement and scaling directly to Jackpot Hikari and stuff like that, that Hikari and Kashimo would scale above Ryu since Ryu seems more relative to Yuta. Was Ryu pretty much bullying Yuta? Yeah, kind of. But even still with that, I can understand that metric. But there's a big issue. Being nebulously above Yuta, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Sure, you can argue the bolt may scale high enough to harm Sukuna, and the bolt is described as undodgeable. Like, legitimately, even within the confines of the verse, it's described as an undodgeable attack. So if Kashimo can manage to land enough hits on Sukuna, then it's entirely possible that he could, you know, do some decent damage to him. But Sukuna kind of just, like, annihilates Kashimo in the worst way possible. Because there are certain issues that Kashimo has. One, bro just has nothing on the scaling front to apply that he could even touch Sukuna. Like, he could even lick Sukuna's toes at this point. Mainly because of the massive gap that's established between the relative tier that I would put like Yuta, Ryu, Hikari, and Kashimo in, versus the kind of like upper tier that 15-finger Maguna's in. Like, legitimately, we gotta realize bro is out here one-shotting, speed blitzing and one-tapping characters that are relative to, if not slightly above, Yuta. Meaning that Kashimo would have to suddenly be a whole speed blitz tier above Ryu and Yuta in order to simply compete with Sukuna at all. And notably, that was a Sukuna that was still mostly, at least a little teeny tiny bit, being suppressed by Megami. Now, with Megami absolutely shattering as of chapter 219, there's pretty much nothing holding Sukuna back. Meaning he's likely even faster and even stronger than he already was. And top this off with the fact that Kashimo's not just going to be fighting Sukuna. He's going to be fighting everything Sukuna has to offer. And that is a lot that Sukuna has to offer. Look at it like this. He will have to fight not just Sukuna, who has access to his whole shrine technique, which includes Cleave, Dismantle, the Burialist Domain expansion, all of which we don't know if Kashimo has a counter to, and top that off with the fact that he has to deal with all that, plus the Piercing Bull, which Kashimo would have to at least land a couple hits on, as he's trying to not get overrun by it as it repeatedly slams into him. On top of that, his whole Cursed Energy may be getting entirely negated by the Tranquil Deer, which will just be posted up, casually releasing RCT, negating everything he has to offer. On top of that, he's going to have to be dealing with probably like car-sized divine dogs that are going to be running around and chasing him, trying to get up in his guts, on top of dealing with the fact that there's going to be a gigantic not multi-continental, but a gigantic skyscraper-sized Thunderbird that's going to be dropping his own lightning bolts on top of his dome piece. And the worst case scenario, he's going to have Maharaga looming about. And who knows what size Maharaga could be if Sukuna actually decided to put some cursed energy output behind him. And realize any of these things individually would be hard for Kashimo to handle, because all of these things should reasonably scale to some portion of Sukuna. And once again, Sukuna is an entire speed blitz and one-shot tier above characters like Ryu, who Kashimo, while I can see the arguments for him being above, is not an entire speed blitz and or one-shot tier above. unless you argue the lightning bolts and stuff like that. So with that being the case, I'm not exactly sure how Kashimo could even remotely stand a chance inside this matchup anymore. Before we got this new Sukuna, maybe I could see it, but now it seems not impossible. Even one of these things would be impossible for him to defeat easily with enough stamina left to go head to head with Sukuna. And don't get me wrong, Kashimo is extremely durable for a guy who just seems to be, for the most part, a regular dude. Like, remember, this is the same guy who fought Jackpot Akari for multiple rounds straight, and afterwards he kind of just got up with like no real significant damage. Sure, you could argue Akari was holding back on him, but even still, it's pretty impressive that he was eating these crazy hits from this crazy powerful individual with infinite, constantly flowing amounts of cursed energy with like basically scratches by the end of it all. But still, that's not enough against all these things alone. Like, sit down and tell me, how is it beating Mahoraga? Like, sure, we can make arguments that Niue's electricity wouldn't even really be able to affect Kashimo, and he can just punch it in the face hard enough that it goes. Like, I can see that. You know, Kashimo has an electric trait himself, so there's no reason that Niue should be able to affect him. Fine. Let's say that hypothetically, the piercing bull does itself in, because every single time it makes contact with Kashimo, as long as he keeps punching it away, he's going to keep placing charges on it. He could even wombo combo it a little bit. Bada bing, bada boom, that thing gets bolted to death. Gun. GG. Let's say that's that too. Let's say the Divine Dog is too big and too slow and too lumbering to actually do anything to Kashimo. If Yorozu can dodge it, Kashimo can dodge it. He places a couple charges on that bad boy. Boom. That thing gets dropped too. Move on to the Tranquil Deer. It's not even a fighting kind of Shikigami, so maybe he could just one-shot that thing too. Just really just beat it up, bully it, slobber knock it, if you will. And then you obviously have things like the frogs. And the frogs, even under Sukuna's control, aren't going to do much. Neither is Rapid Escape. That's not necessarily going to be too impressive unless they get like massive or something like that. And based on how Gege's drawing them now, I don't think that's going to happen anymore. So that's obviously not going to be the case. So Kashimo does have an answer for a majority. Sure, it would be a little bit difficult, but a bolt to the head can definitely take them all out. But the biggest issue is Mahoraga, because Kashimo has two abilities. One, punching things. Two, bolting things. That is all he has in his arsenal. So the moment he punches it, and it gets immune to punches, and the moment he bolts it, and it gets immune to bolts, what does he do to beat Mahoraga alone? And considering we've seen that Sukuna is more than willing to drop it since it's now under his control, there's nothing that Kashimo can really do to get past that. Especially considering we know that Mahoraga doesn't just adapt to a specific type of attack, it'll adapt to the general thing. As Sukuna notes after he opened his domain expansion, well, not its domain expansion. After Sukuna opened his domain expansion on top of Mahoraga's dome piece, it managed to survive it for the most part and was starting to regenerate and heal just fine because it had mostly already adapted to slashing attacks. So let's say Kashimo's curse technique is really this big, massive, insane Raijin Thunder God thing. If it's still electricity based, it's likely that Mahoraga could just eat it. Like, just be like, oh no! Okay, we made it though. And then bada bing, bada boom. And even still, let's say somehow, just in some otherworldly event, that Kashimo with his super secret, crazy, next level, insane in the membrane technique manages to blast through Mahoraga, one-shot it perfectly, and now that it's under Sukuna's control, it's done. He can't resummon it. Sukuna still has his own super crazy final 10 shadows technique thing that we don't know about. Like, notably, Sukuna went out of his way to drop 2 more on us, so we are now at 9 total, but we have no idea what the last 10 shadows thing is. We have not a clue. So he could have something that's perfectly built to capture or counteract a super crazy final attack by Kashimo. And then Kashimo's done. And even then, let's say all goes so well for Kashimo. Let's say Sukuna drops all the different Shikigami and they'll just get one shot. Because Kashimo's just suddenly through the roof in terms of his scaling, and now he's just absolutely body bagging these creatures. And say Sukuna just runs out of all of them, all 10 of them. He still has to deal with Sukuna himself and Shrine. And that's going to be extremely difficult. Notably, Shrine on its own is very difficult for Kashimo to deal with. These are instantaneous flying slashes that we've seen pretty much no one be able to properly react to other than Mahoraga, the thing that can adapt to literally any phenomena in the entire verse as long as it survives the first hit. So Kashimo, who has no established reason to suddenly be able to see it, will be getting hit by a cleave. He will be getting hit by dismantle. And I say that as if he's only going to get hit by one. He's going to get three-pieced. Like, you know how Ryu casually got three-pieced by Sukuna just dancing around him? Yeah, that's the same thing that can happen to Kashimo just like that. Just like that. 3 cleaves straight to the dome piece. Kashimo does not adapt to things like that. Kashimo's not crazy like that. I'm sorry. And let's say somehow, once again, since we are just slopping Kashimo off, we are giving him the ultimate benefit of the ultimate doubt. Let's say he somehow, through his experience and his special strats and skills and his super secret crazy technique, he somehow manages to survive the first hits of Shrine. First cleave, first dismantle. He's managed to survive that somehow. Then he's going to have to deal with the domain. And how? How does Kashimo do that? Like, we do know he has Hollow Wicker Basket. That is something that he does in fact have in his kit. But we also know, after seeing Kenjaku's Barrierless Domain, that if you have a simple domain type technique, it can very easily be overwhelmed by a powerful domain. And considering this is Sukuna we're talking about, the guy whose domain by the very narrator itself was called a divine technique, I don't think Hollow Wicker Basket's going to hold up all too long. And then what's Kashimo going to do when he gets assaulted by literally infinite amounts of slashes until he's rended down to pieces? I don't know. I just legit have nothing. And we're all hyping up Kashimo because he has this super crazy unknown curse technique that a lot of people, myself included, believe is some sort of lightning god transformation, considering his references to the Raijin. But even still, that's acting like Sukuna doesn't have more things in his bag. Like, sure, we already know that Shrine isn't his only main technique. He has the fire arrow that was big enough to cause like a massive explosion that could one-shot Maharaga. He can cook. And who knows how many other techniques he has. I've heard a really good theory going around that like all of his different markings on his body are like different seals. That's why he says like box open, and then we don't see any of his seals disappear, but who knows? He may be covered in the darn things. And he may have had even extra ones on his secret extra arms that we just don't get to see. So he may have numerous other curse techniques all built to counter Kashimo. And let me separate from all the power scaling gear and the numerous abilities that Sukuna has that would absolutely body bag Kashimo before he could even really reach him. Let's be real here. Do you think, any of you Kashimo fans, do you think Kashimo's actually going to beat Sukuna? Like, think about it. Sit back and consider who Kashimo is on a narrative level. Like, separated from the power scaling, which, you know, we can very easily do. I thought Ryu was going to be something, but once I separated from the power scaling and looked at it from a narrative front, yeah, Ryu getting one shot and job, it makes sense for building up Sukuna, even though Sukuna didn't need it. Ryu was not an important character. How important do you really think Kashimo is? Do you think he's ever actually going to do real damage to the King of Curses? Do you think there's any chance that he's going to beat him and not someone like Gojo? Or that Sukuna's going to lose at all? Think about it. Sit down. You can pause the video right now, even if you need to, and really think about it. Does Kashimo really stand a chance on a narrative level? Is he one of our main characters? Heck, is he even one of our supporting characters? When was the last time we even got Kashimo mentioned? Even in the flashback or the cutaway to other characters when everything was going down, we saw Hakari and Panda. We didn't even see Kashimo. That's how important he is. We saw Hazunoki and Remy, but we didn't see Kashimo. You really mean to tell me that you think Kashimo's that important? No, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. On a narrative front, I do get Kashimo putting up a pretty decent fight against Sukuna, because specifically his whole character was written around fighting Sukuna. Like, period, point blank, that's what he was introduced to want to do. So I get it. Narratively, it seems like there's some heft behind that, but we've also seen another character whose entire narrative was an obsession and desire to fight Sukuna, and what happened to them. It's Yorozu. And now, to be fair, do I think Kashimo and Yorozu have anywhere near the same amount of build-up or respect behind them as characters, or really general fandom hype as each other? No. Yorozu was admittedly built up from the moment we saw Megami's sister Samuki with the seal on her head, which is I believe that predates Kashimo, but even still, the amount of intrigue that was put behind her was much less in comparison to Kashimo, who had a whole ton of intrigue behind him from the moment he was introduced in 158 and shown off one-shotting people and being established as one of the 2 people within the entire game to have over 100 points at the time. 200. He even added a new rule. He's the one who introduces to that concept. So narratively, I do agree with the general idea going around that Kashimo is more heavily weighted than Yorozu, despite Yorozu's more important ties to Megami by possessing Samuki. Inarguably, Kashimo has a bit more narrative weight behind him, but still, even with that being the case, I just don't think he has the heft, the girth, if you will, to really put him up there on the level of someone like Gojo, who does have a probable chance of fighting Sukuna and maybe even winning. We'll talk about that in its own video. Or someone like Yuta, who probably gets one shot, but still has more heft behind him as a character. Itadori, once again, despite being what should be much and massively weaker than Kashimo, still would make more sense on a sheer writing level, on a narrative level, for Itadori to get his get back against Sukuna rather than Kashimo. If I'm being realistic with y'all, what I see happening to Kashimo is an unfortunate case of jobber syndrome, where we just job him for no reason at all. And like, to be fair, Sukuna doesn't need jobbing. But remember, this is Gege we're talking about. Kenjaku didn't need jobbing either. But what happened? We had a character who's been in the narrative way longer than even Kashimo pull up on our boy Kenjaku. In their first fight, a special grade dropped a black hole on his head and she still failed. Still did absolutely nothing. No lasting damage or nothing. She may have caught him lacking a little bit, but she didn't do much in the end. And I see the exact same fate happening for Kashimo. Isn't it impressive? We have all this buildup with Kashimo. He was one of the 2 players that had over 100 points. He fought up against Shaq Patakari, a character who in narrative and even out of narrative in some scans is called stronger than Yuta, the special grade second only to Satoru Gojo in terms of ability. This kind of buildup, all this kind of hype, wouldn't it be crazy? Wouldn't it be bonkers if this beyond special grade tier threat was absolutely body bagged and bullied by Sukuna? Wouldn't that be crazy? I think so, and I could see Gege doing it, especially considering Kashimo's nature. Notably, in my video that came out a little bit ago around the Sukuna reveal, I talked about how I thought everybody and their mama was going to just jump Sukuna. Like, legitimately, just straight up, we aren't in Jujutsu Kaisen for nothing. Jujutsu Kaisen, we are in that, here and now. So I thought everyone was going to jump him. But think about Kashimo as a character. Do you think he wants to jump people? Bro wanted to take on reverse jumps, which is why fighting Sukuna will make him so happy, because he's literally going to be fighting like the 10 Shadows technique alongside Sukuna. But that's the thing. I don't even think Kashimo would really fit in that narrative just based on his character. He wants to run the ones. Do you really believe that Gege would let Kashimo run the ones and succeed? Like, do you really think that? If you do, more power to you, but just looking at it and how Gege writes characters and stuff like that, I don't see Kashimo fulfilling that narrative purpose. Though I do admit he has a much higher chance of getting like an actual multi-chapter fight in comparison to someone like Ryu. Unfortunately, as much as I hyped up Ryu and as much as I do believe he's still a very powerful threat, arguably like top 15 in the verse pretty confidently, pretty solidly. Even with that, I do kind of understand why he didn't have an extended fight. He just, 1, didn't have any build-up or real general interest in Sukuna, and 2, you got a job one way or another. And with that being the case, with Kashimo's build-up behind him, you know, the mysterious curse technique that he's only allowed to use on Sukuna, the introduction that he had in chapter 158, all the build-up behind it, I could see it lasting a solid 2-3 chapters. Maybe 4 or 5 if Gege's feeling generous, but I just don't see him succeeding. I don't see him doing anything but getting bullied. Like, maybe not to the same degree that Sukuna was bullying Chogo, right? Because I think we can all agree that that was just embarrassing. Like, secondhand embarrassment was all that was radiating from the fight between Chogo and Sukuna. I just felt so bad for the boy because he was getting absolutely annihilated and body bagged for doing nothing other than existing. But even with that being the case, I don't think Gege is going to do Kashimo like that. But I think it'll be somewhere in between that. It's going to be another Maharaga fight. I think that's what we're going to see here. You know how when Maharaga first pulled up on Sukuna at Megumi's request, Sukuna was kind of toying around with him, being like, oh, okay, this thing's kind of interesting. What can it do? And Kashimo was going to be like, I'm gonna beat you. I'm going to fight you, Sukuna. And Sukuna's going to be like, okay. Okay, you say that. I hear what you're saying to me. But I'm gonna need some proof, Brody. I'm gonna need some proof. And it's literally just gonna be Sukuna just dancing around him. Like, you know how Sukuna was treating Yorozu at the start of their fight when it was more grounded and hand to hand before he started spamming shadows? I think that's what's gonna happen at first. And then hypothetically, right? Say Sukuna and Kashimo are exchanging hands. They're going back and forth, back and forth. Kashimo's smacking him up, trying to figure out if he should activate his CT immediately or not. And then he's gonna hit Sukuna with a lightning bolt. And Sukuna, knowing him, will probably be like, oh shoot, wow, you actually like blow off my arm there. That's a little bit concerning. Hold on. Oh wait, I can't even summon the deer now because I'm missing the arm. Fine, I'll do it myself. Boom! He pops the arm right back out because we know he can regenerate in the vessels that he has. Then he's gonna be like, okay, you seem like you some. Well, yeah, go ahead, try that again. And then they're gonna exchange hands some more. They're gonna throw it back. Not throw it back. I mean, some people probably want to see Kashimo and Sukuna throw it back, but probably not throw it back, but run it back. And then they're gonna throw hands again. And the next lightning bolt that Kashimo tries to release, Sukuna's gonna block it or dodge it or something like that to show how crazy Sukuna is. It's just going to be this next level play where he like disappears into the shadow and appears behind Kashimo, or there's something crazy where he reacts to the lightning bolt. Or if he's feeling extra disrespectful, he pulls what he did against Jogo and opens up his own lightning bolt seal and then strikes Kashimo's lightning bolt with a lightning bolt of his own. And then Kashimo's like, whoa, wait a second. All right, maybe I need to get serious. And then as he lunges in again, trying to get a little bit more serious, bring a little bit more of that power, then Sukuna starts dropping Shikigami just left and right. He starts off with the baby stuff, the generic stuff. He's with the divine dog. Kashimo throws paws of the divine dog, quite literally, and then bada bing, bada boom, the divine dog gets slain. Sukuna's like, darn it, lost that thing. You know what? Fine, let's do some rabbits, like get escaping. Throw a rabbit escape at him. Kashimo just starts tearing through him left and right, and then suddenly through the rabbits comes the piercing bull, slams Kashimo, sends it back, and he's like, what the heck, I bet we'll do this too. And then he starts slamming the bull, drops the lightning bolt on it, then the bull's gone, and then bada bing, bada boom, as Kashimo lunges back in towards Sukuna with more charges built up on him, he's like, fine, let's do this, I'm gonna hit you real good. And then bada bing, bada boom, Kashimo's cursed energy is disrupted because Sukuna summoned Tranquil Deer, and that's releasing the RCT that's negating Kashimo's cursed energy. And then Kashimo's like, fine, you know what? You about it. You really are. I see why Kenjaku said you were the strongest sorcerer he ever knew. Let's do this. He drops the curse technique, and Sukuna's impressed. He starts getting thrown around, smacked around, in a very similar vein to how Mahoraga was starting to do him at the beginning of their fight. Just boom, boom, boom. But you notice as the fight is going on, not too much damage is actually happening to Sukuna. Sure, Kashimo was doing crazy things like flying around, throwing lightning bolts left and right with no charge build up, just crazy amounts of stuff to Sukuna. But Sukuna just keeps healing it off. And you notice that Sukuna has once again summoned Mahoraga's wheel above his head. Kashimo has no idea what that is, so he's just going to keep striking. And then let's say for some reason or another, Kashimo manages to somehow slay Mahoraga, right? Because obviously, let's just give him the benefit of the doubt and say he doesn't just lose to Mahoraga outright. He actually manages to beat Mahoraga with like some super ultra omega lightning technique that dismantles Mahoraga on a biochemical level, and the Shikigami just detonates. And Sukuna's like, well, would you look at that? You managed to beat all my Shikigami, even the strongest one that I've shown so far. And Kashimo's like, shown so far? You better show me everything, King of Curses, or else I'll strike you down right here, right now. And we just see Sukuna go, Ryoki, Denkai, Malevolent Shrine. And he drops the Malevolent Shrine on Kashimo's dome. Let's be extremely generous. Let's just slap out Kashimo even more and say he somehow survives this through like a super amped hollow wicker basket, or somehow he's able to perceive all the different abilities due to his CT, and he's able to dodge and start bobbing and weaving through them, avoiding the guaranteed hit. Then Sukuna's like, fine, you really about that? I'm about to drop the ultimate 10 shadows on you. And then he pulls out the final crazy stupid Shikigami that has all the different amps from all the slain Shikigami that Kashimo has executed, and then bada bing bada boom, it absolutely annihilates Kashimo. As Kashimo's lying there on the ground, he's dies with a grin on his face because he's like, wow, you really are the King of Curses. This really was our Jujutsu Kaisen. And then he passes away. And then I think you get like the Gojo fight afterwards, knowing how you would do everything. You would job Kashimo to just hype up Sukuna ever more, because Kashimo's been hyped up even more than Ryu, so you get that extra job in, extra, and you really prove how powerful Sukuna is now that Megami's fully sunk. You get the final reveal of the ultimate Shikigami, and then you lead into whatever battles that are left for Sukuna. Whether it be a battle against someone like Gojo, a battle against someone like Itadori, heck, throw Nobara in there if you want to get fancy. Regardless of anything, I don't see Kashimo winning. One, because his scaling has nothing to suggest that. Even with his higher scale lightning bolts, Sukuna's crazy. Sukuna definitely has more in his kit that he hasn't even shown us yet. And top that off with the narrative relevance of Kashimo just not being high enough to take down one of the major antagonists of JJK. I just don't see it happening. Combine this with Kashimo's probably unwillingness to actually contribute to a Jujutsu jumping scenario, I just see Kashimo unfortunately doing himself in by his own desire to prove himself alone against the King of Curses. However, that's what I think. Kashimo fans, do you have hope for Kashimo? Do you believe that Kashimo is going to actually be able to do something against Sukuna, and then I'm lowballing the boy too much, and realistically, he actually is cooking just a little bit, Please let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure the notifications to miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do a Patreon below, each one as low as $1 $1 exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Now, thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off.